Hey, what's going on, everybody? How you guys doing? My name's Ian Robinson, and I am the one of the master trainers here at ZBrush for ZBrush things. Just like this intro, it's super fresh, super amazing. How's everybody doing? What's going on? Kate Wynn, John Jags, how you guys doing? Welcome in, everybody. So again, here is typically the day I go live, where we show a bunch of just fun ZBrush things and stuff like that. But today, if you see the title, we have a special guest today. And so before we get into that special guest, I actually just want to showcase just a few things real fast. Actually, mainly one thing real quick, fast, and in a hurry, which is bada bing, bada boom. Again, we mentioned it last week, but ZBrush for iPad is coming sooner rather than later. It is on its way, but right now we're looking for people to help beta test. So please, 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 like definitely follow the link below if you want to try to get on the beta test team. What's up, Atul? How you doing? Long time no see. Absolutely. What's up, Anya? How you doing? Hello, chat. Hello, special guest. Yep, absolutely. So that all being said, done things and all the good stuff we do, we can just like get straight into all the jazz. So I'm going to remove this guy. Again, go fill that out. And I'm going to bring on this guy.
Hey, everyone. How are you guys doing?
What's going on, dude? All right. So some people in the chat might actually recognize your face, but
oh, yeah.
This is like probably the most like unofficial one, but Rodolfo, please introduce yourself. Tell the world what it is, who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do so well.
Hi, my name is Rodolfo, and I'm a ZBrush trainer here at Maxon. And I was a ZBrush live streamer. Some of you guys from the audience might recognize me from my ZBrush lives last year. But yeah, I'm just here to have fun, have a chat with Ian, and let's do this. It's gonna be fun. Yeah. Cool.
Yep, absolutely, dude. So for those of you who may not know who Rodolfo is, we actually have some of his works that I'm going to show on the screen real quick. And then also too, we're going to be sculpting today. So this was going to be a little bit of like we're hanging out, we're sculpting, we're having fun. But yeah, so if you want to follow Rodolfo or know more about him in general, then you can definitely follow the link I just sent in the chat. And then, you know, obviously you have a lot, dude. Like, so you're an environment artist. Like, let's take like looking at some of your amazing work. Like, what's one of your favorite pieces here that we should look at?
Well, it's hard to decide, you know, otherwise they wouldn't be there. A lot of them are not there. I can promise you that. I would say, yeah, Gate to Sanctuary is one of my favorite ones, not because it's complex or anything, but it is very dear to me because it was featured on ZBrushCentral. It was top row, and that to me was a major milestone as an artist. Right, and it's one of those things that you keep, you know, idolizing a lot of the artists that are right there on the top row for such a long time, and then all of a sudden your small little project makes its way into that, and it was such a crucial point in my basically my self-esteem as an artist, right? Because that gives you a nice boost to your ego. You know, and that was really fun to do. It was 6 weeks. I did that in 6 weeks. This is Unreal, actually. It's in Unreal, but it was mostly done in ZBrush. Like everything you see modeling and texturing wise is all ZBrush and Substance Painter. So that is a good example of how you can use ZBrush and Adobe Substance 3D to actually make a full environment. And yeah, that's one of my favorite ones, not because of its, again, like the scope or anything, but it's mostly because it represents a lot of my passion when it comes to 3D software, which is ZBrush, Substance, and Unreal, basically.
Yeah, which is a very common workflow as well, which is super cool to, you know, and it's super cool to, you know, to have you on board and actually dive in further in that. Because, you know, as a lot of you may not, you may know, or, you know, here at Maxon, you know, obviously there's ZBrush under the belt now as we merged with Pixelogic a couple of years ago, but also too, we have partnership with Adobe. So there's a lot more exposure to pipelines and workflows that we want to discuss, especially when it includes our tools, and bring a lot of that transparency together. So this is actually like a super cool piece to show that off on. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring Rodolfo back onto the public face, because you're going to be hosting your own live streams as well. And something that myself and Rodolfo are going to be slowly transitioning to and focusing on is, taking more of those questions of that pipeline and process. So, ZBrush Live is always going to be ZBrush dedicated, ZBrush focused, but a lot of you have questions of how do I take, vertex color and actually bake that into Substance Painter for ID maps? Or how do I bring over my environments, into Substance Painter? Or what's a workflow between ZBrush Substance Painter? And then how do I get a final render out of that too? It's like Cinema 4D, Redshift, or even in Unreal with our Cineware, which is a straight plugin into Unreal Engine. So one of the fun things that Rodolfo and I get to do is actually play with that stuff. So how excited are you to actually to kind of help connect those dots a little bit?
Oh, well, it's actually part of the reason why I think this is a perfect job is because I get to do what I always did, but I get paid for it basically.
Yeah.
So it's basically, I would still do this even if I wasn't at Maxon, which makes it perfect, right? So so one of the things that always has interested me, even before I joined Maxon, it was mostly pipelines and workflows, right? As a technical artist before this, I used to take care of that throughout like outsourcing studios and stuff like that. So a lot of it is the connectivity actually between softwares, right? Like not just ZBrush, but how does ZBrush play a role in the bigger picture of a pipeline, right? Of a workflow, specific workflows, different types of workflows from different studios, maybe the same kind of product, games mostly, and virtual production and animation, but with different mindsets and different teams, sometimes the workflows are very, very different, right?
Yeah.
So that whole part of the process is something that really interests me. So I love sculpting. ZBrush is my Play-Doh, basically, right? I usually say this, right? When people ask me, what are your two favorite things? It's like, when I was a kid, I played with Play-Doh. I wasn't very much into drawing, ironically enough, when I was a kid, but I did do a lot of Play-Doh and Lego. And I always say that ZBrush is my Play-Doh, my adult Play-Doh, and Unreal Engine is my adult Lego box, basically. So it's like I do the Play-Doh things, and then I kind of assemble them like Lego, in the rest of the pipeline. So this is part of what I think is my biggest passion, which is looking at pipelines and also plugging in the fun workflows from ZBrush into every other piece of software, regardless of how technical or how artistical it is. Substance can be very, very technical, but it also is very artistic software. But Unreal can be like super technical, right? It is mostly like really, really technical. But ZBrush is pure art form. It's just pure art. You can do a lot of technical stuff because you're plugging it in with other software, but in its essence, it's an artist first software, right? So that's what I like about it, right? Which is it allows you to be like that kid playing Play-Doh, but with digital clay, which is I think the one of a kind piece of software. It makes it one of a kind, right? In the industry, there's not a lot of, there's actually no other software like that, So yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. I always stress that like ZBrush is always been a high specialty tool, but it is one of those limitless tools that's always let you play, and it doesn't feel like work when I'm in there. When I'm just playing, moving the clay around, when I'm trying to push verts and get something that I think looks halfway decent, it just allows us to continue to just explore and sketch almost in without really, like I said, any limits to it, which is super nice and allows you to create projects like this. And this is why we're super excited to have you on board as well, because again, so with you being here now, we have another trainer that's going to come in that's, going to be at events and shows. You're going to see a lot of Rodolfo if you hadn't seen him already in a few events, but we're also going to be focusing on, more tutorials and stuff coming soon, especially for ZBrush for iPad. We're going to have more of that work happening when we get to the point of announcing further dates of release. So there's a lot of content that's going to be coming from the backside, and a lot of it's going to be derived from the two of us. So it'll be really cool to be able to share more of those as they come out. So when Rodolfo goes live, which I don't know if you have your schedule ready or not, But if you
Yeah, I
don't,
do. I do
you
have.
do.
Well, I'll be in the VFX festival, right, with
Okay.
Maxon, in next week. After that, when I come back, yeah, I'm gonna go back to ZBrush Live more regularly.
Yep.
In June, I have a stream planned, but from July onwards, it's gonna be a recurring thing for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Very, very cool. So with that being said, Rodolfo will be another point in which you can ask questions. You can come to a stream, see what's going on with ZBrush, and he'd be more than happy to share all the information and knowledge and stuff that he has. And it's going to be super, super exciting, man. So
Yeah.
we're really jazzed about it. So, dude, welcome on board, man.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
dude.
happy to be here.
And your work is freaking amazing. So we're definitely going to have
that one is a group project, to be fair. That one
Yeah.
was it's a group project. I was the sculpting and detailing specialist, but one of us had a different role. Yeah, that one that you're showing right now, that's individual. That was all me. But the
Wow.
previous one, the Natural History Museum, that was a group project. Shout
Yep.
out to my Escape Studios colleagues.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
man. I love team projects personally. I like collaboration and I like team projects because you could do more to the project in a shorter time. And I feel like too, you then end up you end up learning from each other a little bit
Yeah,
more. Everybody does
for
things a
sure.
little bit differently. Even in ZBrush, I find that like I'll showcase a thing where I'm like, this is how I do it. This is what I find the most results. And then I'll see another artist and they do it completely different. But I love that. That's one of the things I love about ZBrush.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I was the main ZBrush guy. I mean, to be fair, I learned a bunch from that project, especially Unreal, because we had a technical artist in our team. So one of my colleagues was interested in that, just being like an Unreal Engine technical artist. And basically, I taught him ZBrush, and he taught me a lot about Unreal. I mean, obviously Escape Studio is very focused in Unreal, the game art program.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff that you can't really teach in a classroom, and you learn while doing and especially in a group project, you learn from the conversations, going to the pub, having a pint, and talking about the project, and you learn a lot from those conversations, right? More casual, chill conversations, which is something I'm hoping my ZBrush live streams will be, a lot more casual than a tutorial or something like that. It's not going to be, a tutorial format in a sense,
Yeah.
right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I will do Q&A though. That's something I promised on my last ZBrush Live, even though I only did it like once. But I will dedicate a section for like Q&A from what I hear from my Discord and from our official channels as well.
Yeah.
That's going to be in it. But the rest, like, I'll just be working on my own kind of projects and stuff and chilling and chatting. That's going to be cool.
Yep. Well, speaking of stuff, your own personal projects and stuff, you want to show what you're currently working on?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, it's an environment. Oh, surprise, surprise. It's an environment. So yeah, so I'm doing this little piece over here. This is basically part of like the architecture. It's a cave-like environment, and it has like lava on the bottom. But this is one of the pieces, and it's using trim sheets and tileable textures. You can see here, it's repeating patterns and all of that. And I have it in ZBrush. So here's a demystification for you. A lot of people think that you can't really bring in a lot like huge scenes into ZBrush, and it is hard to sculpt, and it has some issues with the scaling. But if you bring it in already set to scale, and then you use this as reference to sculpt whatever you want, then it's fine, right? So you can see here, this is the size of a player character in Unreal. So this is actually huge, so it works, right? And I'm doing this, then I have a whole like displacement map workflow going on that I use all the time, especially if you're using it for Nanite and Nanite specific workflows. It's actually optimal. Decimation Master is the perfect tool for that. I'm not even kidding. This was taught to me by a friend of mine in the industry who's an actual senior technical artist, and he's like, ZBrush is the main tool we use for Nanite in Unreal Engine. So I'm going to do that. Basically, this is going to be subdivided, displaced, and then using decimation to bring it as an Nanite mesh. And then resculpting this centerpiece here, which is, I don't really like the direction it's at right now. It's still in its blockout phase. But the idea is to have these kind of sculptural elements blend into like the rocky kind of formations on the ceiling. Again, I don't have the full environment here, but it is an Unreal project, and it's going to be fun. We're working with Cineware a lot to import and export models. Do a lot of like UV mapping techniques outside of ZBrush. Obviously, ZBrush is good for doing like a first pass on your UVs, but it's obviously not as precise, and it doesn't handle trim sheets and stuff like that. Well, it can do that, but why would you, right?
It's more it's
So
a more
they're
manual process, and it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
long-winded. Yeah.
Yeah, so if it's something, if it's like unique, for example, this middle piece is probably going to have a separate texture set and a separate material within Unreal, multiple separate materials actually, because it's freaking huge. So if you set this to textile density, obviously this bottom section is going to be an entire like tile in the UVs, right? So you're going to have like at least 4 or 5 UVs, and you can do that in ZBrush because it's unique, right? You're going to bake it, and you're going to do all of that stuff. But if you're using tileable texture stream sheets and you want to set it to correct measurements and stuff, then you obviously need something else outside of ZBrush to do those UVs. But for the most part, it is fine. I use the new UV map features with shortest path as well as ZModeler all the time to have that control over the UVs. But the actual point that I'm making is that I don't really like the way this design is coming up. For some reason, I don't like it, especially this back part over here. So I'm going to be working on that, and I'm going to displace this just to have the preview of what it's going to look like, which is really cool.
Nice.
So yeah, that's my plan.
No, dude.
I'm hoping I would do half of what I said on this stream, but I'm not pretty sure. I'm not sure if I can do that, but I'll try.
Well, that's okay. That's okay, because we actually have some questions for you. So,
cool.
it is a little bit of your interview. So, we have Anya, who's asked, Rodolfo, why did you choose to be an environment artist and not a character artist?
Okay. Yeah. So you would think, right, coming from fine art, having a background in fine art and figure drawing and stuff like that, that I would be a character artist, right? But I'm a difficult person, so I like to choose the hardest path, right? So here's the thing: I am very very much into like classical fine art and sculpture and oil painting particularly, and I've been doing that for like 8 years right by now. But when it came time to choose like an actual, when I decided to go all full on 3D again a few years ago during COVID, I was locked in this decision when I was joining Escape. They had a character art program and a game art program, which is basically environment art, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I can go character arts and capitalize on my understanding of anatomy, understanding of form, composition, and all of that, and do good looking characters for games, understand optimization, texturing, and Unreal Engine animation integration, right? Or I could learn all the tools involved in game development or game art, right? So, which is like, if I had to pick between being basically capitalizing on my own skills or going out of my comfort zone and learning a bunch of other stuff, from SpeedTree to Embergen to Quixel to Substance, a lot of Substance Designer, a lot of Unreal Engine, which I was aware of and I did a few works with, and I played around with it for a bit, but I wasn't really an expert in it, right? So I chose the latter, right? I chose to be uncomfortable and to come out of my comfort zone to learn more and to be willing to look like a fool regardless of my 8 years of anatomy experience, right? So that was the decision, and I don't regret it at all, like, because I love video games. That's my biggest passion, and some of you in the chat might know this, but if you haven't, you'll hear a lot about it. I'm pretty sure. So I do love video games as a whole. Ever since I was a kid, ever since I started spelling out words, I can't remember a time when I wasn't a gamer, right? So when I looked at the scenario of going character art or environment art, I looked at the thing that would involve me more deeply within the engine as well. And for sure, environment art is the way to go. So I understand Unreal Engine to a very deep level because I went through that whole, like, basically path, right? Like that environment art path. So that was my decision. It was based off of my passion for video games and not what my strengths were. I was like, I don't care about what I'm already good at. I want to choose something that I'm passionate about, and I want to do it for the rest of my life, right? So, yeah.
No, that's fantastic, man. No, that's really cool. We have another question for you, which is Nanite straight up magic, or is there some gotcha situations that you have to consider? I always find Nanite shadows or UVs end up getting funky. So
yeah, there are some quirks to Nanite for sure. Nanite, you can actually just bring in a mesh directly from ZBrush and it works. And if you're doing something like, I don't know, like a virtual production or just a single still or a shot or whatever, it works. Whatever works is fine, right? But if you're working in games, that's a whole different story, right? You barely use Nanite, and if you do, you use it for like hero props, and you have a few steps that you want to consider and even for virtual production, because Nanite, what it does is it takes the source mesh and then tessellates locally each triangle, right, of the source mesh. So it reads the source mesh's topology and then tessellates based on that topology. So if you already have triangles, and if you have different densities of the triangles based on the form, that's why Decimation Master is perfect for that. Because Decimation Master does that for you. It gives you small triangles and very thin triangles and very highly detailed areas, and wherever that's flat, it's giving you big triangles. And then Nanite would take that and keep that ratio, even though it's still tessellating dynamically, it's keeping the decimation ratio from ZBrush. So yeah, those quirks, and then UVs. Obviously, you need to pack your UVs properly. If it's something that should be a straight island, it still needs to be a straight island. You can't ignore that because UVs are still going to play a role, right? And then but that's basically it. Again, for Nanite, it's just, for me, it's just a pass in ZBrush. Decimation Master, keep UVs on, and you're done basically. And with that, you can also, with the click of a button, create all your LODs just in case you want to use LODs instead of Nanite. With a few clicks, right? In 5 minutes, you can have like 5 LODs of the same mesh, which is really cool, especially for organic meshes, right? So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's super awesome. Yeah, you're basically going to have to crash course me in Unreal a little.
Well, we've been trying to schedule that for a while.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah. Well, basically, right now, we do have another question, but I thought too, like, this one's also from Anya. Rodolfo, can you think of any film or game environment in which you seem is like absolutely amazing? Like, is there a piece of environment that's really inspired?
You know what I'm gonna say, right?
I know what you're gonna say, but I don't think.
Oh, you know what I'm gonna say, and you can plug in the ZBrush the ZBrush Summit presentation. My favorite game, especially artistically and environment-wise, is Doom Eternal. That is for sure my favorite game when it comes to like the artwork that's been presented there. And Doom Eternal is basically ZBrush. And I didn't pick it just because it's basically ZBrush. All the environment was made in ZBrush, everything from the characters to the weapons and then the actual environment. But I actually loved the environment the first time I played it, and this was back in 2020. So it was even before I took Paul's class and before I even got it really deep into ZBrush. So it immediately clicked with me. It was like the stars were aligning. Right? It's just like, hey, here's this game that you'll enjoy, like the universe telling me, here you go. And then a few years later, it's like, oh, wow, okay. So this is actually made with ZBrush, basically. So yeah, there's a whole ZBrush Summit presentation on that. And I remember seeing that and getting my brain exploding when I watched that. And I always refer to that presentation every time someone asks me, like, is ZBrush used for games or whatever? I just show them that, and that's it,
No, it really is. Yeah, I would 1,000,000% say, like, if you want a clear example of how powerful ZBrush is and how it can absolutely be practically the one-stop shop for a video game, Doom is it. Like, that was like a hold your beer moment. Like, it was like the team just said, like, I think they even said it in the presentation. Their budget wasn't super grand, but they really wanted to do a lot, and so at the end of the day, they could do characters, hard surface, and environments all within ZBrush. and then they can even build and expand from there. So everything on that game has been touched by ZBrush at some point in time before put through on the game engine. So this is also one of my favorite, like, absolutely best examples of just the power of ZBrush. So, and there are times where people are like, you can't make a game with just ZBrush, and then I send them this video, and I'm like, here you go. You actually you could. You could. So.
Well, technically, even my final project that you showed, like that open world landscape, well, with the exception of a few things that are obviously other software, like the terrain itself and stuff like that, but everything that you see there, including the trees, which were primarily using speed tree, obviously for procedural reasons, but everything there has at least some part that has been touched by ZBrush, like literally everything, even the trees. The trees were a weird workflow that I don't think I explained on the breakdown, but there's certain sections there in the trunk that are basically ZBrush meshes with decimated, brought into SpeedTree, and then using the nodes to kind of make it game ready and procedural, right? But everything there has some part. ZBrush has some part to play in everything that you see there. Obviously, effects is not, because it's effects, but anything that's modeling and texturing related, even the foliage and stuff, it has some ZBrush. Obviously, the models themselves are like 99% ZBrush, and then texturing, basically, right? But yeah, so that's something that I kept, like that talk. I kept that in mind throughout my entire time at Escape. Like literally, like the teachers there were tired of hearing about that talk, because I will always refer to that freaking presentation. I would go like, you have to watch this, like watch this. I was always showing them that, and they were like, okay, you kind of convinced me. So they became ZBrush fans, or I would say, fanboys, but they became fanboys like me after that, which is, something I'm very, very proud of. It made them complete maniacs about ZBrush. So yeah.
No, absolutely. Okay, so we have another question. Now I'm gonna dare ask it, so no worries. But I will preface before I answer the question. So Rodolfo and I, Rodolfo is on the training team, and I also work with the training team as well as community events. So Rodolfo and I do have opportunities to do a lot of beta testing and stuff like that, but we're not directly on the development team. So just preface that before I ask this next question. But the question is there any possibility that AI functions would be added to ZBrush? I'll kind of reword that more of like, is there anything you would like to see, or have you thought about it, or what are your thoughts?
I don't know, man. There's some possibilities that I think, as an artist, that I would think they would be natural fits, but I don't know. Again, I'm not a developer, so I don't understand what goes into developing any of those features, and I don't even know if that's in the plans. But it is something that a lot of people have been asking. Like I feel like everywhere I go, people ask me about AI, and I'm like, wow, okay, I'm not, freaking Agent Smith or something. I don't know what's happening with the machines, So I don't know, man. I don't know what to say. Actually, it's just
it's a tough question, right? Because we'll tell you officially as it is, from our point of view as artists, and also with Maxon, we're here to support the creative process of creatives first and foremost. We are here to support you, the artist. So any tools that later become part of the programs due to the development, the first thought is, how does this help you as an artist get the stuff done quickly, effectively, and still allow you to have the ability to be creative? And we don't want to take away from that. And that's something that we just have absolutely no ambition to do, is take away your creativity in any way, shape, or form. So, all we can really say moving forward is that, the conversations that are had we're always with that in mind. Are we supporting you, the artist? And if the answer is no, we walk away from that. And that's kind of the idea of it. So if that's helpful in clarity. But again, we're not on the development team. We're the artists that get to teach, get to play, and get to have fun, and get to connect with everybody, and just showcase how amazing the tool is, especially since, ZBrush gave me a career, ZBrush gave you a career. Like, it's just amazing. So, again, it's always going to be
we do the fun part, basically.
We do, yeah.
Yeah.
But we also we do get to hear your feedback of, like, you know, again, we hear it all the time at events, shows, and even in the streams. It would be amazing if you guys added this feature, or what about that feature? Hearing your feedback is super important for us as a company, because the reality is that we can't predict every artist's workflow. Like ZBrush filters into 13 plus industries. So if you're in games, films, you're in jewelry, illustration, comic collectibles, toys, you're into architecture, you're into automotive, you're into, you know, rapid prototyping, you're a concept designer. There's so many industries that we're a part of. And, you know, 3D printing is a huge one, and we can't service one specifically, right? So we're spread out on these industries, and because of that, hearing your feedback is very crucial to us, because then it gives us an idea of a direction that we absolutely could go through. Yeah, absolutely, board games. So at the end of the day, it's more about, again, supporting the creativity process, and then trying to give the features that we absolutely can when it's possible. You know, a joke that actually we talk about all the time, which is like, ZBrush was a first for many things. You know, so like, I'll just call it out, UDIMs. ZBrush doesn't have UDIMs. Well, UDIMs didn't exist when ZBrush was founded back in 1998, 1999. So because the technology didn't exist, there was no way for it. And now ZBrush is, you know, 20 plus years old, like 24, 25 years old at this point, which is insane to think about. And it's changed games and films exponentially over the course of those years. And we continue to try to, you know, raise the bar and make ZBrush fun, exciting, and easy to use, which is also why ZBrush for iPad is coming later. So yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot, and it's exciting. So we're both really excited about it. 100%.
Yeah, like it's fun to be part of the, you know, the revolution, the digital sculpting revolution. It's always happening with ZBrush. That's what I feel. It's like there's a lot of softwares that try to do the same thing that ZBrush does, and sometimes they succeed, but ZBrush is one of a kind in a lot of things. It's very small things sometimes, but it's enough to make the whole process like way more fun and way more streamlined as well. And I don't think that can ever be replicated. Not only that, also the community, right? Like the ZBrush community is just probably the most passionate community I've ever seen. Even as part of that community, which I was a few months ago, not even that long, right? So, and I still am, and still part of that community. I still consider myself like, you know, like just learning ZBrush every day. I still consider myself a student sometimes, which is a hard mindset to get out of if you have the correct drive for that, right? But ZBrush, the ZBrush community specifically, it's something that I find ZBrushCentral very unique. For example, ZBrushCentral is super unique in that because people share their work with not just with the purpose to, you know, like have a portfolio there and then just get a job or something, but it's just about sharing the work. It's like you're in a class, like I was in a classical drawing atelier, a studio, right? And you're sharing work with your peers, but you're not necessarily, most of that work is going to go in a drawer somewhere. You're not going to even, you know, you're not going to do like a freaking, you know, museum gallery show or whatever with it. You're just showing it to your peers for the sake of showing it. And for your artistic, it's part of your artistic process to show, right? And to get that feedback. And I think that's what ZBrushCentral is all about. And I don't see that a lot in other, even ArtStation that you're seeing right now. Like a lot of the work you see there is amazing, absolutely amazing, but it's different. It has a different purpose, right? It has its own place. And ZBrushCentral for me, it's kind of encapsulates the mentality and the mindset actually of the ZBrush community, which is just sharing artwork and doing cool things in ZBrush, regardless what it's for. If it's for a game, if it's just a sculpt, if it's, you know, whatever it is, right? And
no, you're absolutely right. That's one of the main reasons that, like, I just, you know, I always kept falling in love with ZBrush, is just because of the fact that the community is so strong. A random fun fact, but if you put two ZBrush artists in the back of an Uber and start talking, they'll forget where they're going because they're just
Oh, yeah.
super invested in the conversation of what's happening, because it's art. It's you get to express, we get to express ourselves, and it's so cool. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you're making. You have a whole community that's there to back you up and support you. And even over these last couple of years, the community has just really been so passionate and showcases, that passion through their work. So it's just fantastic.
Yep.
So yeah, we have a couple comments here too, which is good evening. ZBrush always makes you feel like a student, but in a good way. There's always stuff inside this fantastic software that you haven't thought of connecting to another thing. It's mind blowing. Absolutely. Actually, it's so funny. As trainers, we hear this a lot too, which is, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this, but like, there's so many times where somebody will be like, hey, can you put this in the ZBrush? And then we'll show them that it's been there for the last 10 years. And the minds just go, it's like, wait, when did that get put in? Well, that got put in back in 2005.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, exactly. So, and of course, love this. Looks like XCOM, yeah, which is great. We have I have just got an insight. I'm in the industry. This is from Anya. I've been in the industry for 10 years, and I never knew that it was possible to upload work to ZBrushCentral.
Oh,
yes,
wow.
ZBrushCentral. Yes, absolutely. Do yourself a favor. Everyone should do themselves a favor and just go to, if I could spell for 5 seconds, go to ZBrushCentral.com. And yeah, you get to see a ton of work. I remember the first time I had mine put up on top row, and it was, I couldn't sleep. I was so excited.
You can't replace that feeling, right?
But you'll come in here and you'll see such amazing works of people, this nice concept piece that was done here for May the 4th. So yeah, you'll see just such wonderful works come through, and it's really amazing. You can upload, it's free account, so you can log in, you can upload, and you can see what's going on. And it's also just a great place for inspiration as a whole. So definitely pop in here and take a look. And there's works of all sorts of calibers. So it's really amazing to see.
Yeah.
In fact, fun fact, Rodolfo, you had when you're in ZBrush and then it sits for a while, up at the top, there's a screensaver, and that screensaver actually pulls from ZBrushCentral. So if you were just sitting there, you walked away, you made some coffee, and then you came back and you're like, what's this amazing work that's sitting there? Yeah, that's ZBrushCentral. And so that's the top row that showcases. And so you get to see just amazing work the whole time. It's wonderful.
Yeah, if you have this on right here in the preferences screensaver, you can adjust the timer. You can have it like 10 minutes or whatever. Every 10 minutes, if you leave it, you go get a piece of coffee, and come back, you have a bunch of work just scrolling through your screen, which is something I love, actually. I don't know if what are your thoughts on that, but I love that feature. I just love, getting a coffee here in the office and then coming back, and there's like a bunch of work, like beautiful work, just scrolling as I check my emails or whatever. And I always have like that inspiration right there. And it's just a matter of going, and you can click on those works. You can click on the title, and it's an hyperlink, actually. It's going to bring you to that thread basically on ZBrushCentral, which is really, really cool. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Will it connect if I'm not connected to the internet? Will the screensaver still work? So yeah, I mean, you need an internet connection for that. So if you're not connected at some point, then yeah, it is a live update as far as I'm aware of. So you will need the internet for that to happen.
Well, I understand that it does still scroll some artwork, but it's not updated on the latest. Like if there's a new top row or something, obviously it's not gonna show up on screensaver.
There's some artwork. Yeah, there's some artworks that are embedded in the program itself, because the beta testers get their artwork for that version shown as well. So yeah, very cool. Yeah, I turn mine off as well, actually, if I'm being honest. But that's not. I have it on my personal machine. I have it on my personal machine, but I have it off on my work machine, just because when I stream, I'm doing this a lot with my hands and flailing everywhere. And 10 minutes will go by, and then I'll have to turn it off. So it's like me constantly turning off during stream. So that's why I have mine off. But yeah. So. But yeah, it's a great source of inspiration for sure.
Let's see if it pops up. Actually, before that,
ooh, we got a question.
Oh, this is 60 seconds, right? Yeah, I'm too impatient. I can't. I cannot just stop clicking on ZBrush. It's just stop for 60 seconds. God damn it.
Yeah. So we got a question, which is, okay, gentlemen, I got a question. Every time I auto unwrap a head, it always cuts UVs from the face instead of the back. Is there any default selections for me to choose? Thanks for answering. Heart-shaped face. Do you wanna take this one?
Sure. There are a lot of controls. Like you're talking about UV master, whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they do an auto unwrap.
UV master has a protect. It has control painting, number one, so it allows you to protect, attract, and erase. A lot of basically where the seams are going to be. So let me just go over here. Let me grab one of these. Oh, actually, I'm gonna go and open up. Whoop, just a daisy.
Yes.
Is this work? Is this one? Yeah, this one works. This has some topology over here. Yeah, so there you go. So what you mean is that you go over here, you do UV master, symmetry, unwrap, and then you wait for it a little bit, and then you go over here and you go flatten, and it does random, like it does seams wherever it wants, right? So there's two ways. If I wouldn't use UV master anymore, I would use, the new UV map shortest path thing, which is basically you have control over your seams. So number one method would be go the Z modeler brush. You can tweak the Z modeler brush to go for points, press and hold spacebar, and go to creasing and do shortest path. And then on your edges, I usually also do crease edge loop partial, which I prefer edge loop partial in this scenario. So if you click an edge, it's going to do that little crease over there until it gets to the bottom. So then it can also just control and click, like for example, click one of these points and then click, I don't know, this one. And you can see it's trying to find the shortest path from one point to the other. And as you do this, I mean, I could just do a quick unwrap. You're going to see what's going to happen. You can go down here under the tool palette into UV map, and there's a new sub palette here, basically, which is create unwrap, and you can unwrap based on crease edges. So it's basically you're cutting your seams basically using Z modeler. So you can come over here, you do unwrap. It's going to do your unwrap, and then as you morph the UVs, you can see it cut a seam over there. Obviously, you would need to cut another around the ear, and you had to do like the mouth bag and all of that for obvious reasons. But just in this example, I can showcase like the Z modeler workflow. But there's also, again, regarding UV master, let me go over here to the left side. I'm going to dock this just so I can quickly show you. So if you just do a basic unwrap, again, it's going to give you random pieces of, like shells, basically random shells, and not only random shells, but also basically random seams, right? So if we enable control painting, now you have the ability to click protect, and you can paint. Basically, it's using the paintbrush, and you can say where you want to protect your UV shells, basically. So if you paint around this area over here, and you say, all right, I want to protect this area. I want this area to stay kind of the thing. Let's say we have some hair over here, so you can do maybe around here. This doesn't seem very important because you're going to have hair on top of that, so it's going to hide the seams, right? So then you click this again, and you can do unwrap. You can see there's already a few differences here. If I do flatten, you can see it didn't cut any seams over there. So this is one way you could use to protect whatever your wrap is. I don't know what the model is. Obviously, there's differences if you're using, I don't know, if it's a regular human, this is what you use, right? And then there's also attract. Again, a lot of these features, like every single thing in the UI, this is something I always say to everyone that asks me any question. Like there's a thing that a lot of people don't know, that you can click and hold control, and it will give you an explanation of every single button in ZBrush. Not every single button. There's a few of them that actually don't have that description, but most of the buttons, like 99% of the buttons in the UI, you can actually press and hold control and hover over it, and it's going to show you, hey, this Zplugin palette, for example, if you're holding it on top of the palette, if you're holding it on top of the attract, you can see there's an explanation. Facilitates the ability to actively paint areas on your mesh where seams should be placed. So this is the opposite, right? So, and yeah, and erase, obviously you're erasing the attract. So it's basically blue and red polypaint that's telling UV Master what to actually protect and what it can actually do with the seams. So yeah, this is what I would use for that. Does that answer your question? Like,
yeah, I think that you pretty much covered it all, especially for the new version as well, because like Rodolfo said, that's the unwrap for crease. That's new, as in I believe it was 2023. Yeah, it's 2023.5. I think it came. It came after the first launch of 2023. So I think it was halfway through the year on that. And then of course too, yeah, you have the painting. You also have polygroups too, which is something to showcase. So like here, for example,
wow, really? I missed the workflow that I usually use, which is polygroups with UV Master. I spoke about all the other workflows, but except the one that I use all the time.
So I'll steal this one from you. No worries.
Go ahead.
But yeah, if you have UV Master open up and you take the time to isolate your actual polygroups and stuff like that, you can utilize this to help you out here. So then you can say, if your model symmetry, great, you can keep that on. If it's not symmetrical or it's off center, you can turn that off. But the most important one is turning on polygroups here. So then if I were to go ahead and then say unwrap this, boop, and we'll just go ahead and do that. And then from there, again, we'll just come over here to my UV map and just go morph UV, and we'll flatten that. You'll see now that it's doing its best to take each and every polygroup and unwrap it accordingly. And then you can have more then you can have more control over that. You can come through and adjust these polygroups as much as you would want. So if you really wanted to, like, let's say like the side is this polygroup, and then let's hide this one up on top, hide this one on the bottom, make it really ugly, but you'll get the point. So you have these different polygroups. So then you can have control over this however you see fit. So then you can unwrap however you want. So if you're like me and you model with different polygroups, then that's gonna also help speed up the workflow as well. And like you said, this is what you do this a lot, actually.
Yeah, I use that all the time, especially when I'm remeshing. If I use ZRemesher with keep groups on, which I do all the time, and then reproject the details, I want to have those groups not only follow a specific edge flow, but also to have the seam there. So usually what I do is for example, if I'm modeling rocks, which I do all the time as an environment artist, go figure. So if you're doing rocks and then you want a specific edge flow and you want to kind of hide the seam in between like a rock kind of dent or a crevice or something, you want to keep those groups in check, right? You want to use polygroups to your advantage, not only for sculpting, but also for remeshing, the actual remeshing of the geometry. So if I use keep groups and while I'm Z-remeshing, I usually keep in mind that that's going to be where my seams will be, right, for that rock. And then I can add on that with the new, again, shortest path crease, like add on top of that, and then just use, because you can also crease PG, right? So if I do like a first pass of the UVs, for example, and then the bottom and the top of the rock for some reason are kind of stretched, which you can check with a basic like checkered texture in ZBrush, then what I would do is I would come in with ZModeler on my low poly kind of Z-remeshed mesh and use the shortest path to add to that and crease PG. And then instead of using UV Master, I would use UV Map and do an unwrap based on crease edges, which would include the polygroups, right? Because it's crease PG. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Something too I wanted to showcase while we're on the topic, which is yes, ZBrush does not have a what I would call a typical or practical UV editor at the time. However, there are things you can do to help kind of clean up your topology a little bit, or at least clean up the UV rather. I mean, so for example, here, if you wanted to kind of have a little bit of control, so I went ahead and unwrapped this again. So if I work on a clone at this point, meaning they'll just bring up a second, it'll just take that subtool, clone it off, and I can work on that specifically. So then when I say flatten here, you can see that, yes, this kind of gave me this kind of, this look, and it's pretty messy, right? So if I come here and actually, I'm going to hide this one real quick, and I'm going to hide this bottom one. I'm just going to make this just a different polygroup just for ease of use. So I'll have different polygroups like this. So then I'll go ahead and say, let's unwrap this now. And then if I flatten this, you can see here that I have my polygroups. You can actually edit this. And you can use this with the gizmo. And I would actually do this a lot at Funko because we did everything inside of ZBrush, including our UVs for any animation. So I would use the gizmo and I would Control-Shift, tap here, make sure everything was nice and clean. And I would just kind of move this stuff out the way and just kind of come in here and say, like, you know what, I'm just going to set this stuff over here. And then once you kind of clean up your gizmo a little bit, but then you just kind of start reorganizing or repacking things that make sense to you. And you can actually mask stuff off if you want. So if I wanted to start cleaning this up, I can do so. The trick here, though, is to make sure that it's kept flat. So, and I can come through and I can scale everything as I need it to without affecting the actual model itself. So I can start doing this part here. And then let's just make this really, really quickly just for demo purposes. And we'll just go extreme and we'll just do all of this stuff here real fast. So let's go ahead and mark that there. Boop, boop, reset that. And let's just put this over here like this. So just obviously doing a quick dirty example, but as long as it's within this, this square, I then can unflatten this. You can see my shape hasn't changed. I'll copy these UVs. I'll go back to this cup. And then I'll come through here and then I'll paste that. And then when I flatten that, you can see that my UVs transferred over. Even though my polygroups are different, it transferred that over because I was working on a clone. So here are some, it's some workflows in which that might help you get a little bit more, a little bit more control overall as you're doing stuff. And you could even too come through and flatten this up. And you could start taking the masking tool here. And you can say like, okay, I need to clean this edge up a little bit. So I'm going to mask this section off over here, come in, maybe rotate this a little bit. And I'll use this to kind of just give me a straighter edge. I'll try to straighten some of these edges out. It's a little tedious to do it that way, but I've done that just for cleanliness. So it's not super wavy and I can pack them a little bit better. But again, it doesn't affect the actual model itself. So even me affecting that edge, once it's rewrapped, it's good to go. And then you could just copy that stuff over. So hopefully that's also helpful for that question.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I said, I use ZBrush for UVs all the time. Obviously, if you're doing a big environment, there's a lot of stuff that you can't do in ZBrush. It has its limitations, obviously. But even for those models, I would use ZBrush for a first pass anyway, because it's just faster at handling anything when it comes to UVs. If you're unwrapping, it's just so fast, and it gives you a good result actually when it comes to unfolding and unwrapping. It's just obviously for more technical stuff, you don't use ZBrush, but the first pass is fine. You just a couple of buttons and you have UVs. At least you have something, especially if you're ideating and iterating inside Unreal or anything else. You want some quick UVs just to slap a texture on there and see what it looks like in the render or in the game or whatever it is. That's the best piece of software you have for that, because it's just so fast. One button literally, and you can already see what it looks like in the final product. If you're working with clients or if you're doing freelancing or whatever, and you want your client to have the ability to see what it's going to look like, sort of, you can use UV Master and then bring that model into something like Substance, slap in a couple of smart materials, and that's it. You can showcase sort of what it's going to look like. Apply a LUT to whatever LUT you're using, and there you go. So yeah, for sure there are limitations, but there's a lot of things that you can do with the UVs and ZBrush that you can't really achieve the same results anywhere else, because it's just the way the software is coded that allows for very fast, unwrapping and iteration.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Hey, got another question for you, buddy.
Oh.
Which is there somehow a way to preview the compression and stretching of the UVs made by ZBrush? Otherwise, they become evident later in the texting. Is there a way we could showcase?
You mean like stretching of the UVs, like regular deforming?
Is there a way to preview that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like for example, I just had this over here we just did this, right? So if I flatten, this is the UVs. If I unflatten, so you can go over here to basically to texture map, and you can apply a texture, right? And we have a checker texture. So I can go over here and you can see it's kind of deformed for obvious reasons because I didn't have enough seams over here. There's the mouth bags, there's the ears, but you can actually apply textures and you can see where it's distorting, right? This you use this all the time, right? For you know, to check if there's, you can also check seams. You can click check seams and you can see where, whoops, let me turn off texture. You can see where the seams are being cut. You can see where ZBrush actually came up. It actually didn't do a pretty good job, you know, protecting this area. Maybe it was my fault, or maybe I didn't paint it to 100% over there. You have to keep in mind if you're using something like protect and attract, same thing with like polygroup it from Polypaint, right? You want to use your mouse because either use your mouse or turn off sensitivity on your tablet because you want 100%. Like let's say you want 100% protection here. You want to come over here to protect, and you want to make sure that this is actually 100% painted. And then again, you'd have to. There's still like obviously there's not enough seams here, so ZBrush is going to do the best it can, but there's no miracles, right? So I would use this for sure to check if there's any distortions or whatever. And obviously there's other textures you can use this on. You can use this weird, you know, transparent thing. It's really cool. I don't know. You can use textures in ZBrush just to preview. You can use your diffuse. Like again, if I go over here to the project. Oh, whoops, it's not here. Let me open this up. If we go over to the project that I was working on, the statue over here, the textures are, again, and even the UVs, they supersede that 0 to 1 tile, right? But ZBrush still reads that. You know, manipulation is different, right? But you can use your texture from substance, right, inside of ZBrush, at least to preview what it's going to look like. And then you could, obviously, you can sculpt by hand on top of that. You can use Spotlight. You can use whatever to add to that texture as well. Use Spotlight, you can use Polypaint, and then bake that into the texture. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with this little feature here, this little tab over here, which I don't think it gets a lot of love. Most people, a lot of people don't even know that's there because they think, oh, it's Polypaint. No, you can actually have textures here in ZBrush. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how I go about it, you know.
No. Good stuff. There's a follow-up question, which is, would it work to have split screen on while working with UVs on one side and then having the 3D visual on the other, so you could check in real time, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, you can. I don't use that a lot, to be fair. To be honest, I don't use that a lot because it's all a matter of like your creases, right? And not your creases, Jesus, your seams, right? So if you have enough seams, ZBrush will do a pretty good job. I can show you again. Like, if you go over here, wait.
Yeah, the split screen's a little interesting, actually. So the split screen, if you don't use it, it is before here, real quick, I'll steal the screen and then you can, I'll take you back to there.
Okay.
But with split screen, something to keep in mind is how it functions as a whole. So if you were to go up to transform, and let's just dock this, boop, right over here, and then I have split screen. So notice right now that you see my entire model and everything that is actually turned on. When I turn on split screen, and mind you, I have this cup selected. As soon as I do this and I go to 1, what you're now looking at is the model itself. One side of it has kind of everything else, and then the other side has the one that you're working on. So to your question, if you meant like, can I have the UVs opened up on one side and then working on the model the other? The answer would be no, because the split screen is actually just isolating. Think of it as like solo mode. It's isolating the model that you have selected or the subtool you have selected, and then but it's showing everything else. Where if you were to use normal solo, right, then split screen becomes deactivated and you're only working on the one thing. So to see the larger picture of your model, This is where split screen comes in. And of course, you have a few different versions. You have horizontal, and then of course you have vertical, and then you have the other way, where like screen bottom, screen top, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not a split screen where you'd see this two of the same exact model, and then you'd have one open. It is a little bit different. So depending on what you were searching for, hopefully that also clears up a little bit.
Yeah.
Back to you, Rodolfo.
I mean, what I would do if you really want to do that is do snapshots with your UVs, but that's the most you could do. Like if you want to compare whatever you're doing in terms of like seams or shells or whatever, you could just press Shift S on any part of the model. Whoops, or wrong one. I pressed Shift S and it stopped sharing. That was funny. All right, let me do it again. Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
I wasn't clicking ZBrush's UI enough, basically. So there you go.
There you go, buddy.
So if I press Shift S on this, it's basically copying that onto my document. It's basically printing that. Everything I have, regardless, like polyframe or not polyframe, it's doing whatever. Yeah. So I'm going to test this actually, because I never used it. I'm going to be honest, but I'm going to test it. It actually might work. So if I go over here and flatten, well, there's no UVs because I just opened this, but let's do just some quick UVs. Doesn't matter what it is. The result's obviously not going to be perfect, but if I flatten this and press Shift S and then I unflatten it, there's the UVs. Oh, wow. Yep. Look at this. This is not creepy at all. It's not going to give me nightmares tonight.
It's perfect. It's perfect for Monsterpalooza, man, which is this weekend. So, it's perfect timing, buddy.
Look at that. It looks like some monkey ears over here. Some weird. There was this game from the 90s. I can't remember the name. It was like these dancing monkeys, and they looked like this.
Oh, man.
Jesus. It was a Nintendo game. What was the name?
It
reminds me of that. I don't know.
You're not talking about Donkey Kong Country, are you?
No. Oh, come on. Like, you'd kill me, man, if I was like, what was the name of that game? That little game, that kind of started monkeys. Mario.
I need more context.
I don't know. I'll send it to you when I figure it out. I can't remember which game is it. Yeah, but so you can actually press Shift S and do whatever. I do this with when I'm doing the decimation process, for example. I do this all the time to check the silhouette of the model if it retains the silhouette. You also have your thumbnail, but and you can use the thumbnail with that keeping in mind. So let's say it's a subdivision matter. So let's say I want to do, let me Control N to clear the canvas, and if I go over here, let me just subdivide this, and then I'm going to delete the geometry. Let me delete lower. And now let's say I want to decimate this. So if I want to decimate this, and this has UVs, and I want to keep the UVs, I want to go over here to Decimation Master, click Keep UVs, Preprocess Current. And now if I want to check the silhouette, I use the thumbnail all the time, but I also use the snapshot. So I don't know. Let me just, it's writing file to this. There you go. So one of the things that I see a lot of people doing when they're using Decimation Master is they keep pre-processing. You don't need to keep pre-processing. You pre-process once, the subtool, and then you can just click Decimate, and it does that instantly, right? So let's say I want to do, I don't know, like 20K polygon. So I can do this. I can snapshot this. So I can go over here, do Shift S, and then scroll that back. Actually, let me Control N, and I want to turn off perspective because otherwise it's going to be different views, right? So Shift S to copy that, and now I want to decimate. So if I decimate current, you can see nothing's changed basically in the silhouette, right? So let's say I want to have this as kind of like my LOD number 1 or number 0 actually. Shift S, go over here and do decimate. I don't know, let's go super low. Let's do LOD number 6, which would be like 1K, and now you can see there's some changes to the silhouette, right? So now you'd use this to, look at that. I'm on fire today, man. It's amazing artwork right there. So if I go over to
proud with your Max Headroom style vertices.
Yeah. It's like PlayStation 1 right there. So if I go decimate current again, it still remembers the original mesh because you pre-processed it, right? So you don't need to pre-process. Even if you go too low, you can always come back to the higher levels. If I go and do the 20K again, you can see it's going to be basically the same result as you get here. It still remembers that whole, it's in cache, right? So yeah, I use this all the time, and I use the snapshot. And for the UVs, it's the same thing. That's what I would use if you want to check like islands and stuff like that. But again, I don't see the point if you're basically, if you do like your seams, if you cut enough seams and you protect the areas you want to protect, usually ZBrush gives you a very good result right straight out of the box, right?
Absolutely. So, yeah. Absolutely. And real quick too, I'll steal it one more and then we have a couple questions coming through. But I basically want to showcase this as well, because if you have max on 1 and you would like a little bit more control with UVs in general, then we can use GoZ into Cinema to do this aspect. So as a quick example here, taking that same example of that cup, if I come over here and GoZ this, yeah, don't worry about that, that's fine. If Cinema is not open, it will just go ahead and start scrubbing through everything, and then it'll populate. It'll open automatically, which it's doing on my other screen. So we'll wait for that to open. And then you can actually do a quick unwrap there, which uses a similar auto feature, but it also has like packing information as well. So if you're doing something really quick and you're like, I just need to get some halfway decent UVs done really, really fast, and you try auto unwrap within ZBrush, and then you're like, yeah, that's fine, but not quite what I want, then what you can do is you can come over here, and I just GoZ quickly in there. The name itself is exactly the same, which is totally fine. And you can see here that there is a UV tag in it itself, but then I can just pop over to the UV edit here, and I can say, you know what, let me just quickly automatically just unwrap this and see like what's pack look like, cubic looks like. And you can see here it's a lot cleaner of a result for this, which is fine. So then I'd be like, okay, great. And then of course too, I have some just quick packing options if I don't like this pack job, but this in itself is perfectly fine. So I'm like, yeah, I'm happy with this. So then I would just come up here to extensions, come through and export this out via GoZ. And as long as my names are the same to protect the innocent of everything that goes on in life, then I can come through here. And now if I come down to my UV map here and I morph this out here, I'll have my UVs, which it's on. Oh, it's on. I have it on
dynamic. Dynamic subdivision.
There we go. Boom. I had dynamic subdiv. So now there's my UVs all right then and there coming through. So it's a real quick way to get UVs talking back and forth with GoZ, which could also be very helpful. So then, yeah, so you have workflows that are opening up for you, so you don't have to worry about like, oh, is auto unwrap in ZBrush working for me? If it's not, you have another option. And again, with GoZ, we support GoZ into other applications. So as long as it's a GoZ supported and you're using whatever, then you can do that. And it's just real quick. Toss it into Cinema, unwrap it real fast, clean it up, send it in, and you're good to go. So that's the way to do it. To relax your question with for relaxing in ZBrush, I kind of showed it earlier, which you can mask off areas and do a gizmo, and you could probably do like a smooth relax, but it's not ideal. That would take a lot of work, a lot of time to do that when you could just pop it over to something like Cinema. So yeah. Back to you, Rodolfo, with this question from Anya, who has a lot of questions today, which is super cool. So shout out to Anya. She's asking, do you texture in ZBrush or do you texture in Substance Painter, or maybe you combine them? Painter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sometimes I do. Like again, like Polypaint for me, again, as a games artist, Polypaint for me is either like a first pass on the texturing, then I just bake that out and use that in Substance, or it's basically for vertex color for either the game engine, like if I'm sculpting a tree, for example, and I want wind in the material, like a wind effect, I use vertex color a lot for that. Like, so I apply that to the low poly mesh, which is also generated in ZBrush, or I use that for stuff like, creating quick color IDs, basically for Substance, right? So if I think you're frozen, man. I don't know. Looks like you're frozen.
Oh, there you go. You're good.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought we froze. So yeah, so this is basically a texture from created in Substance, right? So I go over to, oh wow, it closed Substance. There's something. All right, so if I go over to Substance, I'll show you. These are just trim sheets and tellable textures. Basically, I do most of my texturing in Substance Painter, obviously. I used to do, well, I still do sometimes. I do tillable textures and trim sheets in Designer, but mostly I use ZBrush for that. Like, to be fair, I use ArrayMesh a ton. I use a surface noise. I use a bunch of brushes and WrapMode to just create my tillables and trim sheets, live booleans for trim sheets as well. So, wow, Ian crashed. Wow. You there?
Nia, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
My screen froze, like my video froze.
Oh, okay.
Don't mind me. Keep going.
Yeah, so yeah, there it is. There's Substance Painter over here. Let me just pop this in. And if I open my texturing, in this particular model, I'm just using tillable textures and trim sheets. But if you're doing something that's unique, so basically it's baking planes. These are literal planes. Like you can see, there's just a plane, and it has everything from base color to normal maps. This is just the added normal map on top of that. So anything that you have on your layers that's adding to the normals from that come in from the bake. But usually you do like your bakes, you know, like with a height map as well. And then this height map, which I still haven't baked the other height maps, but this height map is actually, I'll use that if I'm doing an Nanite mesh. I'll use that inside a ZBrush. So I have it here. Obviously, I have to bring that into something like Photoshop and flip it over, or have that applied to the mesh. And then as you bring that mesh in from Cinema, ZBrush will read the textures from the material and it will just plop them in correctly reversed, right? So, oh, we're not seeing your screen, by the way. Your camera is still.
Yeah, mine's off for a second. Here, I'm gonna try to turn it off and on again. You keep going.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? So yeah, basically, if we do this, and then we can apply displacement. If I turn on this displacement mode, it's going to show me, hopefully not crash, because this is a heavy mesh. We're talking 15 million, and there you go. So it's not working. Wait, am I in the correct? Oh, Jesus. Right. Well, okay, it's not quick 3D thing. It's on. So let me turn off this texture. I'm going to apply, I'm going to create a new texture just to showcase what's going on over here. Why is it not showing? That's funny. Not at all. Oh, okay. It's on the top. Jesus. All right. So this top mesh obviously is deforming, but it's not deforming properly. It's getting a little slow because as you're doing displacement maps, ZBrush will turn off this quick 3D edit, which means it will lag your navigation a little bit, but it's only temporary because I am subdividing this a ton. So if I turn off, let me just turn off displacement for just a sec. There you go. All right. So just to check if it didn't, as I subdivided it, obviously I want to keep that kind of connected there. So what I can do, let me turn it on again. And usually I find that for this workflow, the intensity is at about 0.05 would be enough. So it's just a little bit of that displacement. In this case, the trim sheet is actually pulling the mesh down, which means I might need to reverse that. But if I reverse, it's going to push the other way. Yeah, it's not going to be perfect. It's the trim sheet that's not made for this. But I can do it even like 0.1. Let's try 0.1 because I don't need a lot for that because it's on the top. So there's not a lot there. So if I go over here and then block that texture in again, where is it? Well, did it disappear? Go to texture. Well, it actually disappeared. I clicked new texture, so it probably replaced the previous texture, but it doesn't matter. So if I go over here, for example, to this other subtool, you can see there's a texture there. This is brought in from Painter. So if I go over to Painter, it's the same, basically the same texture. There you go. So here to, whoops, wrong trim. So yeah, just this is all just to say that I use Substance a lot and in between like Substance and ZBrush all the time. And this thing that I was showing you with the displacement is basically my workflow for displacing the meshes and then decimating. Yeah, I have to turn on quick edit again. And there you go. So this mesh would be using the same thing. So I just import this PSD file directly from Photoshop. And this is already flipped because I took care of that in Photoshop. You can come over here, just open up your height map that is exported from your bakes in Substance. So you open this up, you go over to image rotation, flip, canvas vertical, and you save that, and it retains that information. Be sure to change your mode. Actually, this is something a lot of people get wrong. Change your image mode to grayscale 16-bit. This is important. Otherwise, you'll get this weird artifact, just like a faceting kind of artifact because of compression. All right. So for displacement maps, that's kind of crucial. So as you do this, what I want to do is I want to subdivide. I don't know. This is just we went on a tangent over here, but I kind of learned that from Paul. So forgive me. So there you go. Divide a couple of times until you get like to, I don't know, maybe not as much, and then divide with the smooth on. So you don't want to, kill the form over there and that connectivity. So as I'm doing this, I have 5 million. I think 1 million would be enough. So let me just go back. And then as I go over here, let me just delete lower. I don't need the lower subdivision levels. And I displace this. You can see what's starting to happen, especially on that back wall over there. So I can go and put 1.01. It's going to displace just a little bit. I'm turning on mode. And it's going to displace. There you go. But it's very, very slight. It's a slight effect, like a very slight displacement. If I go 0.05, you can see it starts to actually displace the mesh. This is also because I did my bakes wrong. My bakes are not correct in this scenario because if you do go over here to Substance and you open up bake mesh maps, now the new Substance Painter gives you like this preview with your high poly meshes from ZBrush. And you can actually see where your plane stands in relation to the mesh. And you can see my planes are not actually sitting on top of the mesh, which is a problem because it is going to look at that height map and it goes 0.5 in grayscale is your midpoint. And my height map is actually pretty dark. So that means it's going to push it back instead of pulling it forward, right? So your plane should always be like what you perceive is your midpoint. And then you want everything that's clipping outside of your plane to be pushing forward, basically, and whatever is on the back of the plane is going to push back on your mesh. So keep that in mind. This is a mistake I made, so you should learn from my mistakes. That's the point, right? So everyone should learn from my screw ups. There you go. So yeah, that's a tangent. So yeah, I use ZBrush and Substance all the time in between while I'm modeling, and especially in this later stage. So yeah, a lot of the models in environment art, as you probably, if there's an environment artist in the chat, as you probably know, it's tileable textures and trim sheets all over the place. If you're planning environments for games, that you can find repeating patterns everywhere, even in props. People use trim sheets just texture entire like props. This has been a common practice since at least, like I would say, well, forever. Basically, it's basically a common practice since Doom, the original one. So yeah, there you go. So, but it's still being used, and I use Substance for the texture. Obviously, if you're doing unique, you want to bake that down. And I use Substance Painter or Designer for that, and then you texture the unique props by hand in Substance Painter, and use your masks and generators and all of that. But yeah, whatever I can do in ZBrush to speed up that workflow, for sure I will do. But yeah, like most of the texturing is done in Substance Painter. What?
I think we might have lost him.
Oh,
we might have lost Rodolfo. Wait, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. You skipped.
Did you lose me?
For a second, at least on my side. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow, he scared me there for a second. I was like, wow. Rodolfo, you have such a nice background. Where are you? Oh, right. Okay, I'm checking the chat now on YouTube.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna say we had a couple questions. I think you kind of answered this one just to keep it on topic, and then I'll ask the one that was previous. But it was like, do you bake your displacements in ZBrush or any other software? They personally bake in ZBrush. I think you kind of answered that. You do all that stuff within Substance typically, or?
No, to bake the mesh maps for sure, Substance. Yeah. Like I bake my height map and displacement maps in Substance, but then I use those displacement maps back in ZBrush, which is weird. A lot of people go like, why not just use, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, if you're doing film, for sure, this is something that you would do for displacement in render time. So you wouldn't need to do this, right? You would use ZBrush for sure to preview what it's going to look like, and actually you could do a little bit of displacement, but it's usually in render time that you would displace the mesh. For games, you want to use the displacement map for two things: either displacing the actual mesh and then retopologizing, or to use that to do vertex color painting on your material in Unreal, which is something you do like a height lerp in your material editor, and then lerp between two materials. So do like a layered material system in Unreal. So you do your displacement, your high poly mesh in ZBrush, bring that into something like Substance, bake the height map, use the height map as a plug in your material editor to control blending between various different materials. So yeah, that's just, at least for me, that's what I would use displacement maps for. I'm not that it's not that complicated. Like for character artists, for sure, people in the chat that are character artists probably will tell me, oh no, there's like a bunch of other stuff you could use displacement maps for. But yeah, like for me, that's literally it. There's not much use for now. There's dynamic tessellation and dynamic displacement within landscapes as well in Unreal, which could be something that you could use ZBrush for to create your displacements for that. So yeah, for sure.
Nice, man. Nice. Yeah. Okay, cool. One of the questions before was for environment design with ZBrush to Unreal landscapes. Do you use the landscape sculpting tools in Unreal, or do you prefer doing something specific like a mountain hero in ZBrush to then export into Unreal?
Yeah, if you could do something like that. I've seen a lot of people do slicing, like slicing the terrains they bring in from software that's dedicated to that, which is like terrain generation software, right? And then they slice it up in ZBrush and sculpt, because you get a lot more detail out of the, because usually when you do like even in terrain generation software, it's basically all an height map. It's a displacement map, right? So it's up and down. And in ZBrush you have that like basically side control. You control the sides as well. 3D, right? So when you do that, it is obviously beneficial because you get that control over the detail, but you lose a lot of like the procedural nature of the landscape system in Unreal, right? So there's obviously pros and cons to every piece of, like every workflow has its pros and cons, right? So you could do that. You could use Unreal Engine's sculpting, which is very basic rudimentary sculpting features. Obviously it's not made to do what you would do in ZBrush, but it has the potential to allow you to do a lot of like with the procedural workflows and the materials, right? So yeah, there's those three kind of schools, which is like terrain generation, height map into Unreal, and there's terrain generation, slice it up, bring it into ZBrush, sculpt, and then Unreal. And there's obviously the all Unreal kind of workflow where you do everything in Unreal. You use displacement maps, which is technically you have to create those displacement maps somewhere else, right? So you could sculpt something from scratch in ZBrush and then bake a height map directly in ZBrush. You could do that and then use that as a stamp in the Unreal Landscape Editor. So you have that ZBrush sculptural kind of ability within Unreal, and you retain the procedural nature. So if in the brushes in Unreal, there's an alpha brush, right? And those alphas require height maps, and you can bake that directly in ZBrush, and it retains all of the detail that you get in ZBrush. Bring that into Unreal, and you get that control. So you get the best of both worlds. Those are three different workflows that I personally would use the slicing up thing and the terrain generation and Unreal. So I use all three things. Again, ZBrush is always there for me. It's always like in the back, in the corner, everywhere I go, it's right there.
It's always on. It's always on.
It's always on, man. I have ZBrush open all the time, at all times, possibly. Like even if I'm doing technical stuff, sometimes it's still there. It's still on. Like if I'm doing a material or something, it's like you'd think you don't need ZBrush, and I'm like, maybe. Maybe I still use ZBrush every now and then, even if it is just to pause and just do quick sculpt, I have it on all the time. So
a nice break from a project to just speed sculpt something is always a good mind reset, in my opinion. Real quick, we had one question that just to confirm, you mentioned earlier with displacement maps going into Photoshop and putting it at a grayscale. Would you recommend that for height maps as well?
Yeah. So basically, a height map is a displacement map. It's the same thing in a sense, right? So not in a sense, it's actually the same thing. It's just two terms for the same thing. But in the games industry, usually when people refer to height maps, they mean terrain displacement maps, right? But they're still the same thing. They're still the same data type. They're still doing the same thing, which is displace geometry based on a 0 to 1 kind of scale, right? So yeah, so basically it's the same workflow. I would just bring it into if you're using ZBrush for displacement, obviously you have to kind of flip the texture because of the coordinate system in ZBrush is flipped in the V axis, which is the Y axis, kind of the green axis, basically, right? So if you're doing that, obviously you have that step that you need to take into account. Or if you're using Substance Designer instead of Painter, you can do that in the nodes. You can have two outputs, and one of the outputs is already flipped. You have a transform node, and you flip the V channel there. So everything you make in Designer can be procedural, right? So you can automate that part of the process for sure.
Yeah, cool. And then the next question, and maybe this would be kind of cool if you want to actually demo it, but the question is, can you describe your pipeline in creating trees? I mean, it's not all ZBrush, right? But you mentioned that you do your trees in ZBrush. You want to show how you do a tree?
Well, that might take some time. It would be the rest of the stream for sure, more than one stream. But yeah, so there's two ways basically. If I want to do like a forest, let's say, which is like has a lot of trees, you're not going to sculpt by hand everything, right? That's well, you can if you're OCD and you have something wrong with you, because it's a long project to do. Like if you're doing like an open world terrain with a forest and you want to sculpt every single tree by hand, good luck, right? So you're going to have to use some procedural workflows, right? So that's not news. So in essence, what I would still incorporate ZBrush in the sense that, well, for texturing obviously, and displacement maps obviously, because if you use something like SpeedTree, you still use displacements. You use a lot of that for the gen and spline generation and optimization. In SpeedTree, there's the optimization thing, which basically does dynamic tessellation for you based on a map, right? So that map could be brought in from ZBrush, but even so, if you want to have some authoring of your trees and you want to do, like, let's say pine trees, right? You have a pine forest, and what you want to do is you want to sculpt the base, sculpt the trunk, and as you sculpt the trunk, you bring that trunk decimated out of ZBrush into SpeedTree, and SpeedTree actually takes care of the rest of the spline work for you. It stitches that mesh with the rest of the procedural meshes. But if I'm doing a tree entirely in ZBrush, which I also did, all right, I feel that's where you want to go. You want to go there, right? So yeah, there we go. So that's the previous process would be for automating, and if you're in a game production, that's mostly what you would do: ZBrush SpeedTree and SpeedTree Unreal, right? But in this scenario, let me just go in and open up a clean project over here. There's a couple of ways you could do you can do trees in ZBrush, right? And trees in ZBrush is obviously very individual and unique kind of process. Everyone has their own way of doing trees, right? And most of the people, especially if you look up online, most of the people use Z-spheres, right? You just start with a Z-sphere kind of basic rig of the trunk and the branches, and that process is rather straightforward. So you go over here, let me just plop a Z-sphere, and oh wow, it crashed. There you go. The Z-spheres. That's the process, right? So you click ZSphere and it crashes then.
Well, you do have Painter floating.
Yeah, I have Painter, Photoshop. I have I had Unreal open, but it seems it crashed too. And I'm also streaming, so
you're doing everything with all the DCCs.
Yeah, there's a lot of memory, and there's the Chrome open. So let me go into Is there a bridge
A-Cube
straight from?
said, I came in at the perfect time. Crash time.
Yeah, well, it is a biggie.
Yep.
Sometimes this happens. If you have multiple software open, usually there's no avoiding.
Well, while you reopen that, I'll answer this next question from Jags, which is there a bridge straight from ZBrush to Unreal? At this time, no, there's not a bridge straight from ZBrush to Unreal. However, there is Cineware, which is our flagship from Cinema 4D on over into Unreal. So you could take your ZBrush assets, go Z them into Cinema 4D, and then do the connection using Unreal into via Cineware. And then anytime you want to update your ZBrush model, it's just a quick Go Z application. So that would be the way to do it about this time. We had one other question too come through, which was how to restart. I like to use to do a lot of sculpting bit recently, but I lost my Lappy, and I'm building laptop. Yeah,
that's a funny name for a laptop. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna start calling my laptop Lappy.
Need work, but I'm building my PC, so probably would be ready to start sculpting again next week for some reason. But it's not feeling the same. I'm not quite sure what the overall question is. I guess it's like, if you've been out of sculpting for a little bit and you're maybe like taking some time to get back into it, what would be like a good, like, how do you get back into something if it's been a while? Or maybe too, we can even rephrase this as like, if you are experiencing any type of burnout, or if you're just exhausted, if your head's not into it, which I think all of us here in this room, in the chat, it's definitely something that's come from time to time when you're feeling a little bit, just not in the zone. How would you kind of restart that mentality and get back to it?
Well, I would say just start doing stuff for fun. Like, take out that pressure of, having a perfect art piece on your first go, right? That's the big problem. And I know this, that people say this all the time, and it becomes kind of repetitive and cringy for some people, maybe, but it is important for people who have not experienced that before, especially if you're going through burnout, to realize that sometimes you just want to have fun. Right. And that must be the number one priority. If you're not having fun, then you're not into it, and you can't spend the rest of your life doing it. Right. Because just imagine how miserable you'd be if you're not having fun. You're spending the rest of your life doing that. Right. So number one is try to reconnect with that fun aspect of it. And if you're doing something, let's say bigger projects, it is very daunting, right? Everyone goes through that, no matter how experienced you are. If you're doing a big project, it's always daunting in the beginning, especially the scope of things and stuff like that. So what I would advise, my advice would be to just start doing smaller, very contained projects and very contained sculpts. ZBrush is the perfect tool for that, because it allows you to just start with the sphere and do some blob things, and you end up with a cool sculpt. And you don't need to show that to anybody. Actually, it's the same advice I would give to my drawing students back when I was teaching drawing in Portugal. It would be just to keep a private sketchbook and just sketch for yourself without the pressure that I need to show this to someone. No, you can throw it away at the end. So it removes that pressure from you, right? Same thing if you're going back to sculpting after a long time, just keep a sketchbook per se of like very small sculpts, doodles, thumbnails, whatever, and you'll see that you'll get back to that rhythm. You take off the rust in no time. In no time you'll go back to your form, because it's like your brain is a muscle, right? It remembers its previous form. It's faster to get there once you've been there already, right? So yeah.
No, absolutely. In fact, actually, last week, my live stream that I did, do something weird, do something fun. I made a killer tomato because I was off for 2 weeks. I was super sick, and then I wanted to get back into it, and I was feeling miserable, and I didn't want to die on my couch anymore. So decided to just do something different and just unique. So yeah, definitely have fun with it. Like that's that's again, art is fun. To reiterate what Rodolfo just said and what ACube just said in the stream, so art has to be fun. You know, you want to be able to come in and just enjoy the process. That's why we get into this industry in the first place. You know, we want to express ourselves, we want to connect with other people, and we want to be able to just like make something that's cool and fun and exciting. So I a billion% agree. One more question real quick before we go into your tree demo real quick, which is...
oh, I thought you forgot that.
No, I didn't forget. No, just getting you prepped, man. Getting you prepped. We do this for a living. Somebody pays me to talk. They say, hello, how you guys doing? What's your message towards new artists who want to enter into the game industry?
Well, obviously, and everybody knows this at the moment, so there's no point in keeping the taboo. The games industry is not in a good place right now, especially AAA, right? But there's multiple venues for you, right? There's indie games, obviously, right, that they are thriving in some areas, right? But there's also multiple applications for the same skill set that you would need to get into the games industry. So if you're learning video game art, obviously it's the same workflow if you're doing VR applications, if you're doing art installations, if you're doing previs, if you're doing architectural visualization, if you're doing product design, if you're doing motion graphics. There's a lot of those workflows that kind of overlap, and the skill set is kind of the same. Obviously not exactly the same, but the basics are the same. So I would say stick to the fundamentals and learn the basics, and learn, get yourself a game art portfolio. If you're going to get into games, target a role, target a specific job type, because there's roles and job types, right? You have to target that, make a portfolio for that. And then as you do that, you'll find that there are a lot of other industries and other companies that might find those skills useful, and they'll reach out to you, right? So it's not necessarily just a games thing. It's like, again, I'm speaking against myself because I'm a big gamer, you know, like I love video games. so again, that's my biggest passion, but that's not to say that you can't do other stuff. Like even live concerts nowadays use Unreal Engine and use a lot of the same technology, virtual production technology that is being used in games. Basically, it's still a game engine in its core. So if you understand games, you understand all that sort of like real-time technology and rendering and stuff like that. So I would say focus in on a job role, a specific role, what is exactly that you want to do, character art, environment art, and then inside of that there's multiple like sub roles, especially if you're in a big studio. Specialize, but never, you know, there's this saying called jack of all trades, master of none, right? I don't believe that for a second. I believe jack of all trades, master of one. So you specialize in one thing, but you are able to understand the bigger picture, right? And if you do that, then for sure you're hireable, and not just in the games industry, obviously. And if you get that experience even outside of games, because again, as we were talking about, we don't want, currently the games industry is not in a good place, but that doesn't last forever. Obviously, there's ups and downs to every industry. It's like a stock market, you know, thing, which is it's going up, but then as you zoom in, you can see it's actually going up, down, then goes a little bit up and stuff like that, right? So in the bigger picture, it's going to go up eventually, but it's currently in a down period. So focus in on that. You'll get hired in multiple different projects using the same kind of skills and technology. Build up that rapport and build up that skill set, and then eventually, when the opportunity arises, you'll take it. I'm pretty sure you'll do fine on that. So yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. I also just going to add real quick too. You're using ZBrush, so there are 13 other industries. So you can take a look too about, you know, what other industries there are. You know, a friend of mine used to do game props, and then he moved into like props for the movie industry because he was still sculpting props. It's just moved into 3D printing, and he took that idea of like, well, I make axes and swords and blades and all sorts of cool stuff, and then he just moved into 3D printing, so he was able to continually get work even though the game prop he wasn't getting work anymore. He then moved over to actual film prop. So there are ways to pivot. So if you're you're here, you're using ZBrush, you have 13 industries you can peek at. Don't just try not to hyperfixate on one specifically. If you're struggling, you can broaden out your horizon a little bit, see what's there, maybe pick up some freelance here and there. I mean, again, I love what you said, master
even
of one,
automotive design,
jack of all trades. Like that's really cool mentality. So it's okay to branch out and see what else is out there. You don't have to just fall onto one specific thing. So there's a lot. Anyway, I'll shut up and you can make the tree now. We do have a few more questions, but let's finish the tree question.
Just to wrap up on that previous question. Here's the thing that I see a lot of like nowadays, a lot of like bleak comments on the industry because of what's happening, especially in the games industry. And I just wanted to say, dude, you're an artist, and artists will always be required by society. Even though some people might tell you no, artistry and art making is just it's a luxury, because it's not gonna, in the case of a war or something that happens in the world, art takes kind of like a back seat to whatever's happening. I couldn't disagree with that more. So art is, and you could see it during COVID. Like during COVID, there was a high demand for artwork, be it film, be it games or whatever. And there's going to be a place for artists for the end of time, until the end of time, regardless of the talks about AI or the talks about like the conversation that we're having currently about the games industry. There will always be a place for an artist, right? Because art is always essential to society, even though it might not look like it at face value. So I would say, just look at other industries, look at what skill set you can acquire. If you really like games, you can acquire a bunch of skill sets that will be useful for other industries. So there will always be a need for artists anywhere, especially if you know ZBrush. If you know ZBrush, again, 12 industries, more than 12 industries, and you will find a place for it. So do not despair. I just wanted to say that because I know the conversation online currently, especially on social media, is going a little dark. It's getting a little dark, and because people are finding that they're desperate, right? And they're getting laid off. They're getting their careers being shaken in some way or another. And I think it's important to say that, right? That it is, you are an artist and you're producing artwork because you find it fun, right? Number one. And then your skill set could be, hireable in multiple different ways, but that's a whole different story. Right? It's a different conversation. So yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the tree. There you go. So again, two ways of doing this. Usually people just do ZSpheres, and it's basically bringing in a ZSphere. Draw mode, there's a bunch of like different brushes that you can use. You can just, most people that I see, they just use like basically draw out a ZSphere, go to move mode and just move it to where they want. Go to draw mode, and you can tap one of these link spheres and then just move the branch position and kind of tweak this kind of trunk over here. And this is fine if you're doing something very stylized or very artistic. If you want to go crazy, you can do Z-Sketch. You can use Z-Sketch, Z-Sphere sketching, basically, to go and do like the little, like the bark patterns and stuff like that. If you want to do a specific like twisting flow or whatever. I used that previously for the tree, the hero tree on the final project that you showed a few moments ago. But there's also a crazy way that you can just quickly create a tree, which is using FiberMesh, right? So there's something that a lot of people don't know. You can go over here. Let's just start with a plane. So if I go over here, let's make Polymesh 3D. There's some geometry over there. So what I want to do is I want to make kind of like a very quick, it's a quick way to just make a tree, and then you have a lot of control over that. And it's perfect, actually, if you're using vertex color, like I mentioned previously, to control like wind in a game or something, right? So because FiberMesh has specific masking features to attach to it, right? So if you have this plane, let's just do a little mask over here. Doesn't matter where. Let's just, we can do like back mask. Doesn't really matter because of what you'll see. So I go over here down to FiberMesh, and I turn preview on. You can see there's like a bunch of fibers over there, right? And this is no good. We don't want this. So if you go to modifiers and you turn down the max fibers to 0.0000 or 0.00000001, so the lowest point, you can see it's just one fiber, right? So we're going to use this to create a trunk. right, from scratch in FiberMesh. So if I go to length, I can go over here and up this to whatever. And then the coverage, basically your thickness in a sense. And we're going to change also down here our segments to, not segments, sorry, your profile. Whoops, yeah, doesn't matter. So we get thickness, right? So in this case, it's 3. So you get 3 faces around, like revolving around that fiber, right? So I usually go for 4 because I want to do some twisting and stuff like that. So now it's basically a cube kind of being exported, being pushed out of the floor. So one other thing is we want to basically remove gravity. So it's going to stick up, right, like that. And we want to do, maybe we want to do a little twist. We can do some revolve. Like, let me just change these colors because these colors are not. Oh, shit. Skip note. Yeah, let me go skip note because this is not. It's annoying sometimes. It's just telling you, hey, you have like 4 sides on your fiber. This could, if you start doing a lot of fibers, it's going to eat up a lot of your memory. So, but we're not, so it's fine. So I can do this, and then I can do like a revolve, not a revolve, but a width profile. So I can go like crazy. Like I want to have like a thick base and maybe a thin top, something like that. And then I can control that curve and go a little crazy, something like that. Right. So this is obviously very low poly, but we want to remain low poly for now because we want to do some crazy masking things. And I can up the segments as well. Let me just up the segments over here and reduce that twist because that twist is crazy if you up the segments. So there you go. So now we have something that kind of looks like a trunk. It's not perfect, but And as we do this, if I click accept, it now is a separate subtool. If you go to subtool, there's a separate subtool. But ZBrush still knows that this is a fiber, right? It's still a bunch of fibers. So it understands, if it understands this is a fiber, you can come down here to masking. And as you noticed previously, I did my fibers based on my mask. So if I paint a mask, it's going to generate fibers within that mask, right? So it's the same thing here if I want to create branches. If I want to create branches, oh, another thing I want to do is I want to go back to my subtool. I want to click preview and I want to save this. I want to save this because, I want to do some fast branches. So if I go over here and do save, and let's save this with, I don't know, like, let me do, something like there, save this fiber, doesn't matter. And I go back to my tree trunk and I go to masking. In the masking, there's a sub menu here called mask by fibers, right? So if I go mask by fibers and I click fiber mask, it's going to give me a gradient from the root of the fiber until the tip. So if I flip this over, now my mask is only here on the top. And it's basically falling off. It has a fall off from the top polygons to the bottom polygons. So this is perfect for us. So if I maybe blur that mask a little bit, and maybe there you go. So now if I go back to FiberMesh and I click preview, you can see it's only going to spawn those branches on the top. So I can up the number of, oh, wow, crazy. See that? That's modern art right there. This could go in an art installation right there. So
it's beautiful.
If I go and maybe spawn a few of these fibers, again, I might need to sharpen this mask a little bit. If I control and press and hold control and alt and then tap inside the mask, it's gonna sharpen up, sharpen the mask, and then I will click preview. And now you can see it's not spawning those branches on the bottom. So I can come over here, maybe do, I don't know, something like this, maybe reduce the length a little bit, maybe have some variation, reduce that length over there. And we can do maybe some gravity now. So it can go negative gravity, push it up, and let's do some revolve. So it does a little bit of a twisting motion. And we could also go revolve radius and up the tiling and also do something like that. So now we have some tiling over there, controlling that and that variation within the trunk, right? So let's say, yeah, I'm happy with this. It looks horrible, but you can spend some more time working on this. And as you do accept, now we have 3 fibers, right? But we could do the exact same thing that we've done before. Go over here, fiber mask, Control tap a couple of times. Whoops, actually the other way around. Flip this over, Control tap. Flip this over, Control tap. Whoops, let me do that again. Fiber mask and blur it out. There you go. This works. So now if I go over here and click preview again, now I can up the fibers a little bit more. And again, it's going to be a little shorter because of the original fiber, right? So it can go a little crazy with the length. And then we have this, and then we can do gravity. Now we can do a little bit more gravity over there. Let me just check this length. This length is not looking good. And yeah, I would need to tweak this whole flow is kind of weird. But let's see. Coverage, scale root. Let's do some revolve rates. Yeah, something like that. Something crazy like that. And then the gravity and the revolve kind of work together. Everything works together in a sense. So if you find that one thing is not giving you the best results, just keep tweaking the rest of the values on the other sliders, and eventually that will give you a better result. So let's go back. Here you can see some of the fibers are thinner, and it's also because of the mask. If you have an area that's 100% masked, then eventually that area will have like a full-on fiber. But if it's fading out, in the area that's fading out, it's going to give you like smaller fibers, and we don't want that. So let me turn off the preview and then Control-Alt-Tap to sharpen that mask. So now I will have less of like a fall off. So the fibers will be more consistent throughout in terms of like the length, right? We can control that variation here on the slider. So yeah, we'd have something like this. Let me just make maybe point, I don't know, 0.3, something like that. Again, this is maybe a lot of those fibers, and this revolve is kind of crazy, but it doesn't really matter. We can do this. And then again, we can keep going and accept, and then do the fiber mask again. Fiber mask, Control tap, invert, and Control tap that top point. And same thing, preview. And here's the thing: if you're using cards, you can use cards here. You can spawn cards using FiberMesh, right? So let's say we have the coverage could be a little thinner now and smaller length. So if you wanted cards over here, basically what you want to do is you want to make, basically, first let me simplify this and have just a single fiber. And I want to come over here to my fiber. Where the heck is it? Let me just isolate that. And oops, a daisy. I don't see it. Oh, there it is. Very tiny there on the tip. So what you want to do is you want to have a one profile. So it's a flat kind of mesh, right? There's no thickness to it. And we want to reduce the segments as well to 1. So it's basically a plane. It's basically a quad, right? So if I zoom in, should allow me to zoom in. There you go. If I zoom in, you can see there's like a very thin plane, which is also something we don't want. So if I go to coverage and I go and maximize this value and then go to length, let me reset this curve. I don't want a variation in the length. I want this to be at 0, the length variation. So you can see like it's a very tall, thin plane. So I might want to reduce this length to about like 1,000 until I get like a square. This has a twist. Again, I have to reset all these values to 0. Revolve goes to 0. Gravity goes to 0. Where's gravity? For now, it goes to 0. And you can see it's basically a thin plane. And then you can add a texture, a fiber texture. So if you have like a leaf or something, which I actually do over here, actually coincidence, right? So if I go over here, let me just push this. Where is the desktop? Is it? Yeah, test leaf, PNG. If I open this up, would you like to? Auto resize. There's a leaf, and if I up this transparency over here, anything that's black, ZBrush interprets as transparent. So if you have a black background, even if you don't have an alpha within that texture, ZBrush will know if you turn on this transparent texture, it will know that those parts are transparent. So now we can actually start tweaking this. Let me do this. Scale root should be at 0. scale tip, not 0, I'm sorry, 1. Scale at 0, it's like non-existent. Scale at 1. Yeah, so basically then you'd have to tweak all these like coverage settings to get a like a square kind of fiber. So it would be like 50 maybe. I don't know. I have to check. And yeah, so then the size, overall size, where is the size? There's an embed button as well, which means you can slide it outside, like it goes like floating. You don't want it to be floating. So if it's a leaf, it should be embedded at least a little bit, just a slight amount into the mesh, right? And yeah, so this is basically how I would create a tree. This is a horrible tree. Don't use this as an example, but it's basically what I would do. And after this, I would just come into the trunk and just start sculpting. But the cool thing about this, actually, this is what I wanted to show, is that if you're using something like vertex color to control the wind on the branches or something in the material in Unreal, you can come over here and do that FiberMesh masking, like fiber mask, and then you can apply a red color or something like full-on red vertex color. And this is actual vertex color. Polypaint is vertex color. So if you have this, then you can use this to control the wind in the game or whatever you're using. So if you go over here and do fill object, oh, whoops, the mask is not, that's fiber mask. Actually, you can go over here to the fiber mask profile and control this fiber mask attenuation in a sense. So if you go over here, let's do focal shift and fiber mask. Yeah, let's focal shift the other way, I think. Yeah, there we go. So if I flip this over and now I go over here to color and I fill this object, it's the other way around. Jesus, I always get this wrong. Fill it. You know, the tips, only the tips of the branches have like red vertex color, and it's pure red, and it has a nice fall off, which means the wind will affect the tips more than the root of the, and ideally you don't want it to affect the root of the branches, otherwise it's just gonna move around like crazy, right? So yeah, this would be something I would use for, you know, wind, especially if you're applying vertex color. Anyone knows that anyone that works as a foliage artist is aware of how tedious it can be to apply manually like vertex color to a tree and branches and stuff like that, because sometimes there's a lot of branches and a lot of cards, so that could be tedious. And here there's like 2 buttons that you click and you apply your vertex color and you control the wind using ZBrush. So yeah, sorry for the long rant. It's been 20 minutes to answer that question.
No, that's perfect, man. No, that's perfect. And that's exactly the type of, again, that's the type of content and stuff like that, that, again, when you either see myself or Rodolfo live, this is what we like to do. We like to come in, help out, answer questions. And this was insane. So, and seriously, making trees with fiber mesh, dude, perfect.
Yeah.
So,
well, no, Paul taught me that. So there you go.
There you go. There you go.
When he taught me that, it blew my mind, actually, you know, because I was making trees and speed tree and in Maya and stuff, like, because, you know, at Escape, we did a lot of that. And when he showed me this, I was like, wow, this is going to change my entire workflow, you know? So yeah.
No, absolutely, cool. Man. No, that's super amazing. So while we can't tackle everything right now, because we're running out of time and stuff like that, there was one question that came up before that either you could take or I could take, up to you. But so the last question we'll take here is the process of making a tileable texture in ZBrush. Lately, they've been using ZBrush to extract height data and create alphas from mesh, and then they use it in Designer. But if you wanted to create a tileable texture or alpha in ZBrush, how would you do that?
All right. So yeah, obviously we don't have time for more questions after this. This is gonna take, you know, there's multiple ways, and I do that all the time, right? So if I'm using, for example, if I'm doing like a ground surface, let's just go back to like a clean project over here. So if I'm doing like a ground surface, I usually start with a plane, obviously. So if you go, actually, ideally, I would start with this plane over here because it has the correct proportions. And for what I'm showing, it's rather important. So if I start with this plane 3D from the tool palette, and then you have your initialize, not you define, like initialize button, which means you can change like the radius, like the actual, basically the size of the mesh and the divisions. But in this case, we don't really care, because what we're going to do is, there's two ways we could do this, like to actually sculpt on top of this plane and then make it tileable. Or what I would do in this scenario is use a bunch of like voodoo black magic from ZBrush, right? Like weird sorcery to be as non-destructive as I can, right? So number one, the first method would be, you have a plane, let's do a copy of this plane, because it is required to keep everything kind of within the document. It's the way the WrapMode works, right? We're going to use WrapMode. There you go. I was trying to tease it, but I can't. So there you go. So what I do is I actually duplicate this plane, I bring it back a little bit, and on my original plane, which is going to be my sculpt plane, I am going to resize it just a tad, right? So that original plane has the correct proportions, the correct scaling to it. And that's what ZBrush is going to use to wrap around. So if I have this, and then I'm going to do some flat subdivisions, because we don't want to round out those edges over there. So I'm going to subdivide this until we get to like 1,000,000. And any brush that you're using, and you go over here to brush, and you go to curve, and you go to wrap mode, and turn on wrap mode. And what it's going to do is it's going to go from one side to the other, right? So you can actually up this wrap mode. Let me just dock this right over here on our left palette, left shelf, whatever. And if I up this wrap mode, what it's going to do is actually repeating that stroke based on the document, basically, right? So it's repeating on the document. So that's why we have that other plane on the back, because we want it to prevent two things, actually. We want to prevent stretching when looking at it from the front. We want to prevent like that border. But since our plane is actually bigger, we don't really mind that, right? Because we want to keep the wrap mode tiling in the correct spot. And then that plane is going to be the one where you'll bake to. If you bake to that plane, you're absolutely assured that it's going to be tileable, right? So this is method number one. And I use this with a bunch of brushes. Then you can start sculpting like rock patterns and stuff. Go to BCB for clay buildup brush, turn on wrap mode, and you can start going crazy. And it goes from one side to the other. And this is what starts to happen. See that? This is something you don't want to happen, right? So yeah, you would either store a morph target, and then you can also just do a quick, if you're using the other plane, you can do like a mask border, and then basically, what do you go to deformation? There's a button there. There's deformation. Where's deformation? There, deformation, and you can morph to grid. Basically, you morph the edges to grid, and then you can polish and get that topology back onto the grid, and your wrap mode works again, right? So this is method number one, which means you would use this to sculpt manually. Method number two, and this is where it gets crazy, right? So bear with me. Method number two would be to use surface noise, ArrayMesh, or NanoMesh, right? So I use ArrayMesh to preview my tiling. So if I press in my keyboard, Alt-A is my hotkey for ArrayMesh. We go down here to ArrayMesh, turn this button on and off. What I do is I want to lock position because I don't want it to move, right? I want to lock size in case this changes, if this starts to stretch, right? And then I want to repeat this a couple of times. So I want to go and offset this by 1. And this, what happens is it's going to go 1 unit to the side. I want to do 2 units because in this case, I lock the position. So the position of the pivot is what matters here. So let's do 2. And I know that the plane is exactly snapping to that edge right there, right? So if I do this and then I append a new stage, and let me just go back in this case, because I want to do -2. Oh, whoops. Wrong keyboard. I have like 3 keyboard layouts. Let me go to... Jeez, it's just crazy. So if I go and type in... Let's repeat this twice and repeat. Let's do -2. There we go. So now we have it from side to side. Oh, we don't. Okay. I guess it's -4 now because there's 2 meshes, right? So -4. There we go. So now we have that actually. Is it -4? No, it's -8. Oh, wow. Okay. It's -8. There we go. Because it's 2 meshes. This is 2, and it's multiplied by 2. So it's like, yeah, okay. So it's a power thing, right? So as I'm doing this, if I start dividing without the smooth modifier, and then I use a wrap mode, this is what's going to happen. You're actually sculpting on top of your array mesh. But this doesn't exist. It's not real geometry, right? So what you're doing is this, and you're assuring that your textures, even though there's some stretching there, it actually doesn't matter, because then you're going to make actually make the mesh in the array mesh, and you're going to bake it to a plane. So this is only for you to know, hey, this is actually tiling pretty nicely, right? So this is number 1. This is number 2, actually, this second method. And the third method is NanoMesh. If you're doing like a ground plane, let's just throw in some surface noise real quick. So I go over here to surface noise. I'm just going to use one of the max on noises plus the regular surface noise. So these are new. These are the max on noises that we brought into ZBrush 2024, and they are from Cinema. Basically, they're noises from the max on library that we're using in ZBrush. So if I go over here to, where is it? Oh my God, there he goes. Max on noise. I'm gonna press OK. I'm just gonna, push this down to not mix the regular noise, so I can see what I'm doing. And this is procedural noises, so that means you don't need the UVs. It doesn't give you stretching. It is procedural, right? So you can have it, and you can have these controls on, because they actually work with the max on noises, kind of like the basic noise in a sense. So if I do this, let me just up the strength a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. These are some noises. That's pretty cool. Let me just change the noise. Maybe I don't like that. I want something a little different. And you can see there's a bunch of them. So I'm going to blend some random noise with the actual, let me do 1 for scale, because I want to make sure this is tiled. And if it's not, we can also use the WrapMode to tile this. So, and we mix the basic noise. I'm going to do a minimum. Actually, no, difference. I'm going to mix that and change that tiling over there. Change that curve just a little bit. And I get like a weird ground plane. I don't know. It's not tileable, obviously. But just to showcase what I mean, you can have this, and then let's apply this to mesh. Let me just actually lower this a little bit more. Apply this to mesh. And what's going to happen is now you have a piece of terrain, but you still have your subdivisions. So what I want to do is I want to copy this plane. A lot of copying here. So if I copy this lower subdivision and delete the highest subdivision, delete higher, and retain that, I'm going to use that plane just for the sake of NanoMesh. So if I have let's say a rock, I know we don't have a lot of time, so I can't just sculpt a rock from the ground up, but I'm going to do something really quick. I'm going to use one of my favorite brushes of all time, which is the Mallet Fast Brush. And I'm just going to go really quickly, just start sculpting some weird facets over here, like that. This is 43,000, so it's a lot of geometry for what I'm doing. Again, super fast, incredible rock sculpting skills right here. See that? Oh my God,
this is amazing.
You'd imagine this in something like Assassin's Creed or something, right? So, yeah. So this is a rock, or something that resembles a rock. And let me just put that flat area on the ground. That is kind of important, because we want that to sit nicely. And there you go. So what I want to do is I want to create a NanoMesh brush, right? A nano brush, let's call it, right? A NanoMesh brush. So what you want to do is, first and foremost, go to this. Basically, I want to capture it from the top, because I want it to spawn from the top. But then we have controls over that. And I want to go to brush. And I want to create insert mesh brush, create a new brush, and then go over here and create a NanoMesh brush from this. And now this is basically ZModeler, right? So if I go back to my tool, this is super like a crash course, super fast, man. And I hope people are following. So if I go over here to this one, let's turn off solo mode. And you can see the plane is kind of like sitting on top of the high resolution mesh. And you can start painting those polygroups. Like I'm just starting to paint like some polygroups over here. And then what I can do is come over here to a poly, press and hold spacebar, and I'm going to tell it to do that the polygroup all. So if I start spawning that mesh over there, you can see it's spawning on every single one of the polygons that has that polygroup. And now, this is the beauty of NanoMesh. We can come down here to NanoMesh, and we have a ton of controls for that. So we can randomize this, randomize the rotation, randomize the depth, randomize the size, randomize whatever. And this is what I would use if you're doing something that's like a tileable ground plane. And since it's a sculpt, you can also have polypaint on it. You can also have your polypaint maybe to bake IDs and substance, so you can differentiate like the ground, the mud, and the rocks. So you can have that differentiation even though it's a single texture, right? So yeah, we could start, you know, like doing the width, weird width, and then just add some variation there, some rotation, like the offset maybe, just do some variation on the offset. The Z offset, obviously, we can do some crazy things over here. And the most important one, which would be a little bit of rotation, like 45 degrees. Let's do actual 45 degrees, not 445, but 45 degrees, and some variation, usually minus 45. So it's basically a 90-degree variation. It goes, you know, like that. And the same thing for the Y. No, actually the Y. Yeah, you could do the Y. Actually, let's do 20. And then some variation there. And some variation on the Z rotation as well. And now we have all these, and we can start like playing with the size. There's also, of course, like the width variation controls that. And the random seed also allows you to randomize that seed procedurally, right? And then also the random distribution, which means you can have, like, for example, a little bit of that and add a pattern. And then on top of that, you have like the random rocks. Oh, look at this, beautiful. But yeah, so random rocks everywhere. That's what I mean, right? So I use a lot of these features that are within ZBrush that is not primarily, they're not like actual sculptural features in a sense, right? To just speed up that process, and I can iterate and maybe create 3 different variations of ground planes or ground textures with just a single sculpt, right? You're sculpting once, and then you have all that power to kind of iterate non-destructively within ZBrush. So yeah, this is a quick overview of those features, and I know we're running out of time, but you know.
Yeah. No. That's awesome. I have a super old school way of tileable textures too that I feel like we should do a quick honorable mention.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap it up because we could do this all day long.
I mean 2.5D.
Yeah. So here, real quick. Well, first off, what you just mentioned, there's actually a plugin at on our website. It's called NanoTile Textures. This was written a long time ago, I think by Joseph Drust, if I'm not mistaken. Which does speeds that process up that you were showcasing. This is actually a really great one to do. So if you're like interested in like exploring that further,
oh wow, I'll check
this is
that
a
out.
great one to download.
Sure.
However, so a really old school way of tileable texturing as well actually does do the 2.5D drop. So a thing to do before you start, so you make sure it's a true one-to-one, is go up to your document size and make sure that you are actually a square document. So something like 1500 by 15, use like 500 by 500, 1000 by 1000, whatever you want, a space you want to work with, just for pixel density. So I'm just going to do it in 15 by 15. And then if I zoom out using this top zoom out one, instead of the bottom one to do the alt zoom, if I zoom this out, I can now see that square that is there in my space. Now, if I just move this thing around in space and time and stuff, I just take my sculpture, then it's obviously not going to be tiling. So what you could do now is, you know, draw out the mesh that you would like to make, you know, tileable. So if you have a bunch of rocks and you want to do that, then go ahead and put the space here, and then just go ahead and hit Shift S. And then you're going to go ahead and just start like kind of placing this. The thing to remember is do not leave the border space here. You want to keep within your space. So we'll just put like a couple different sizes, say something like this, maybe rotate this over a little bit, Shift S, maybe rotate this one, scale this up, Shift S, blah, 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 right? So we'll do something like this, Shift S. Now what you can do is once you have your space here, you can drop back out of edit mode for a second, just switch. And then with the tilde key, you can actually press and hold the tilde key and move this around. And as you see, once I enter that space of the edge here on the left-hand side, it's now populating on screen right. So then I can move this over, say something like that, draw out another shape, because now I'm in 2.5D mode. And so I'll draw out a few more of these, and then I'll press and hold the tilde key, which again, for a lot of keyboards is next to the 1 key. Press and hold that, and then I'll drag this down. And as I come down, now you'll see here that it's actually tiling on over. So then I'll add a few more areas of space. And then from here, this in itself can be exported out as an alpha and stuff like that. So you can come here and you can grab your document, and now I have my tileable texture right up here. And of course, I'm just showing the pure black just in the background so that you could see that it's there, but now it's all tiling, and then you can bring that in, you can export that out, use it for whatever you want to use. So this is a really old school method of it. And if you mess up, just Control-N, clear it, and then start over. And you can do this with all sorts of stuff. So that's a quick honorable mention for that as well.
I feel like 2.5D doesn't get enough love nowadays, but it is super powerful. It's incredibly powerful. There's a lot of stuff you could do there, especially with the new Drop 3D thing. I love that feature, man. I think it didn't get a lot of attention. From a lot of people don't know that it's there, but I use it all the time, and it's absolutely incredibly powerful. There's nothing like it in the market, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we'll get to talk more about it for sure. So,
yeah.
But we are unfortunately out of time. So again, thank you for everyone who has stopped by and said hi and so forth. Real quick, I'll show my screen one more time. But if you would like to try to get on the ZBrush for iPad beta, and you're sitting there wondering when you can try to break it, go right ahead and apply for that, because we are actively looking for beta testers, which is fantastic. And then as well here, boop, if we pop on over, if you would like to follow Rodolfo, not only here at Maxon, because now he's just a super amazing ZBrush trainer with a lot of ZBrush knowledge, you can actually go ahead and follow him on his socials right there in the chat as well. So again, thank you to everyone who stopped by, hung out with us. Rodolfo, welcome to the team officially. You've been here a few months in the background, actively working, but now you're here. You're going to start your live streams. Again, just real quick, remind everybody, when is your live streams going to start?
So it's on the 12th, from what I understand. Let me recheck that, because I did schedule that yesterday, but I have a horrible memory. But yeah, well, it is on the 12th. It is on a Friday. So yeah.
Okay, cool. We do have a calendar and stuff like that for people to follow. So if you want to make sure that your favorite artist is going live when they're going live, because again, there's a lot of actual ZBrush live artists. So sometimes we actually share space and time. So if you want to know when specifically someone's going live, you can check the calendar. Like I usually go live around this time. There's another artist that sometimes will take slots when I'm not here. And so you can go to that calendar and find out when we go live and come hang out. So with that being said,
14th, I'm sorry. 14th. It's on the 14th of June.
Cool.
So yeah, that Friday.
Yep. And you're based in Germany, so you are 9 hours ahead of me.
Good morning, Ian.
Good morning. What's happening? So definitely give Rodolfo a follow. And hey, buddy, thank you for coming in, hanging out. It's been fun.
It's been a pleasure, man. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Thank you, man.
Then we'll catch everybody next time.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.